Happy holidays and Happy New Year, everybody. I hope everyone had a great 2022. I know I had a pretty good year, and as far as theme park trips went, I had an awesome year. While it wasn't as packed as 2021 with the 2 massive road trips I took, I managed to visit 5 new parks and revisit some parks I've been to as well. I also visited a few places to get some plus ones like family entertainment centers, so in total I added 34 new coasters to my list. So of course, it's now time for my yearly tradition of counting down my top 25 coasters. While there are some of the same coasters as last year on this list, there are some new additions, and of course, a lot of the rankings got shaken up a bit. Last year on Instagram, I compared what my list was to the year prior, so I'll make sure to stick the old ranking of each ride in the video somewhere. However, out of the 251 coasters I've ridden, I feel like there's so many great coasters outside of my top 25 that I have to mention. So before I start the countdown, I'll highlight the coasters in the spots 50 to 26. So, starting off the top 25 is the only aerodynamics coaster on this list, Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point. This was the world's first hypercoaster in 1989 and deviated from Aero's megaloopers of the time. The ride features an out and back layout along the shore of Lake Erie. This ride isn't really smooth, but it's not really rough either. However, that gives it a ton of character, and because of the janky transition, it creates some very strong airtime, laterals, and positives. I really do enjoy the fact that this is essentially a 200-foot Aero mine train, and I hope it stays as long as possible at Cedar Point. Number 24 is another hypercoaster, this time from Intamin, Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. Superman has a fantastic layout filled with strong airtime, forceful turns, and even some great scenery. Really the only downfall of this ride is the weird restraints it has. The giant U-brick lap bars can get uncomfortable, and the trains are a bit cramped for taller riders like myself. But the ride's greatness really weighs out the weird trains. Number 23 is once again another hypercoaster, and the first of the B&Ms on this list, Diamondback at Kings Island. This is one of the best examples of a B&M hyper. Diamondback has a great first drop, amazing sustained flow to airtime over every hill, and provides a very long ride. There's really not a lot wrong with Diamondback, if anything at all, and the ride really only suffers from a slight rattle, but it's nothing to scoff at. Number 22 is a new addition to the list, Verbolten at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Audrey was hyping this ride up so much that before I got on, I had no idea what to think of it. Looking at the layout, I wasn't expecting much, and figured rides like Apollo and Alpengeist would be better. I was very wrong. Verbolten has punchy launches scattered throughout the ride, extremely forceful turns, amazing in-depth theming, and even some laterals. The drop track was also very surprising, and while it doesn't give a lot of airtime, it gives what is almost a jump scare to me. Also, not to mention, the drop in the back row down to the river gets some great airtime, and Verbolten is really just a super well-rounded ride that really surprised me, and make sure you definitely get a night ride on this if you can, because my night ride was my first ride on this, and I was absolutely blown away, and pretty much why it's so high. Number 21 is Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds. Boulder Dash is a CCI masterpiece with one of the best settings for any coaster. This ride is tucked between trees and a mountainside, and pretty much right up until the end, this ride follows the terrain pretty much to a T. It really feels like an out-of-control experience, since you're basically hurtling in between boulders and trees, and you're getting intense laterals, airtime, and it provides a much rougher experience than most wooden coasters. However, it's not painful or bad by any means, it just gives a rough ride, which makes it a lot more intense. It pretty much feels like you're on a runaway train that has no signs of stopping. Number 20, Thunderhead at Dollywood. This was my first GCI besides the Hershey GCIs, rest in peace Wildcat. I came off very impressed. The ride's nature is aggressive and it's filled with awesome airtime pops and laterals. The ride feels a lot longer than it actually is thanks to the twisting layout that is hard to predict, and the fact that it's pretty much built into a valley between Wildwood Grove and the rest of the park. This was my favorite GCI for a long time, until I rode the next one. Number 19, as I mentioned before, is my favorite GCI, Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. Mystic is undoubtedly the best wooden coaster at Kings Island, yes, better than the Beast. It has crazy pacing, tons of airtime, an aggressive layout with tons of speed, and even a fun thematic element at the end with the shed. It gets a little bit too much hate in my opinion, but it's something nice to look at while you're waiting to advance to the station. The airtime isn't super strong, but there's so much of it, and the ride takes the hills so fast that it's simply just too good to not talk about. Number 18 is a bit of a controversial choice, however it's Mind Blower at Fun Spot Kissimmee. This is another super aggressive wooden coaster with very intense elements and a crazy compact layout. The ride features a steep drop, intense airtime, and an aggressive ride, also not to mention that awesome zero-G roll. Mind Blower is however really rough. Riding it can be like being in a boxing match, and honestly I kind of liked the roughness, but at the same time it really got to me really quick and was really hard to re-ride. However, I thought that made the ride a lot more intense and feel a lot faster. Number 17 is Raven at Holiday World. Raven is an intense wooden coaster from CCI and is one of the best night rides around. The ride starts off with a bang with an out and back layout featuring airtime hills and intense lateral turns. The ride then kicks it up a notch going down another large drop, which in the back row gives one of the best ejector airtime moments of any wooden coaster. And soon after, it's all low to the ground turns with the most intense laterals in the park. Sorry, Legend. Number 16 is my favorite Phoenix at Knoebels. While it constantly gets the praise of the world's best wooden coaster, which in my opinion it is not, it's still a fantastic coaster. Not only does it have the classic layout that everyone loves, but it has intense airtime on almost all of its hills and drops. The buzz bars truly allow the airtime to be way more intense than if you had regular lap bars, and pretty much allows you to feel every inch that you get off that seat. The ride ends with a bang with an intense double down that flings you into the buzz bar, a fast turnaround with laterals, and then a finale of airtime hills that will have your butt coming off the seat every single time. Knoebels also takes great care of Phoenix. It's very smooth, but of course it has that wooden coaster feel to it. Number 15 is Orion at Kings Island. This is currently the only B&M Giga coaster I've ridden, and I was truly surprised about how great this ride is. I was expecting a good ride, but not something this great. Orion has a drop that lasts forever, fast pacing, very strong flow to airtime on all of its hills, and of course, even a forceful helix thrown in for some variety. Now, Orion isn't obviously the longest ride, but that's fine. It packs in a good amount of quality elements in a shorter amount of time, but even then, it's still a pretty decently long ride. Number 14 is my favorite B&M, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This B&M Hyper has a pretty standard L-shaped layout, however the way it executes that layout is what makes it so good. Each hill is filled with borderline ejector airtime, and it is very sustained. The second half of the layout is more scenic than it is intense, however that first overbank turn manages to give a pop of airtime if you're sitting on the left side of the train. The final turn over the lake is also a nice scenic piece, and overall this ride is very well rounded. Number 13, Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. This ride always gets a ton of hate because it's not the original rip your face off type Raptors. However, I personally love Jersey Devil's pacing and sequencing of elements. The ride begins with large and powerful elements like the crazy drop, the stall, and the crow's nest. The ride finishes out with smaller elements like the forceful overbank turn, outer bank floater hills, and then the one last little speed hill before it throws you out of your seat into the brake run. While it may not be the most intense and powerful ride around, it still finds its way onto my list. Number 12, Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. This ride has always been one of my favorites. It's a super long ride and features a great variety of forces and elements. Obviously there's a ton of ejector airtime, but there's also strong laterals and hang time filled inversions. I think this is the most lateral based RMC, and Alan Schilke even talks about this during multiple interviews when the ride first opened. While the ride has pacing issues on some not so warm days, it still provides a solid ride. Number 11, Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. To be honest, I wasn't expecting Pantheon to be as good as it is. The ride starts out with a fun and funky beginning with some nice hang time, laterals, and even some airtime. The launch sequence is very intense, and while the first launch isn't anything to boast about, heading into that backwards launch with the airtime hill is one of the best moments on any coaster. Going backwards that fast and getting ejector airtime is truly crazy. The spike is super fun and filled with floater airtime. While the train doesn't go super fast over the top hat and the outer bank, it still provides very good airtime, and the drop is one of the best on any coaster. The rest of the layout is filled with a variety of awesome elements with the airtime and laterals and hang time. You hit the brakes with tons of speed, and it really shows the great pacing of this ride. It's overall a fantastic addition for Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Starting the top 10 is Maverick at Cedar Point. I've talked about this ride quite a bit, and it still holds up as one of my favorite rides since first riding it in 2019. Maverick has everything: an amazing drop, intensity, laterals, ejector airtime, inversions, a great launch, and even some theming. Overall, Maverick is easily one of the most well-rounded coasters and is truly one of Intamin's best. Number 9 is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. This is definitely one of the most aggressive coasters ever built. Each airtime moment is extremely pronounced, and the ending airtime sequence has to be one of the most gut-wrenching airtime moments that will test the true strength of the lap bars. The inversions are also fun and present some fun hang time, and even some whip, and obviously it's an RMC, so it has some laterals, and it has some pretty great pacing. Number 8 is arguably one of the most intense coasters in the world, Intimidator 305 at Kings Dominion. I-305 is a pedal-to-the-metal experience the entire time, with its breakneck speeds and transitions. The ride starts with a bang, with its 300-foot drop into an intense helix with tons of positive Gs. The ride then goes around into a mix of airtime hills, intense turns, and snappy transitions. This ride is truly unbelievable, and I can't believe Intamin said, yeah, this is fine. Number 7, The Voyage at Holiday World. This is a ride that actually feels long enough. Unlike a certain wooden coaster, this ride uses its long layout and terrain to its advantage with tons of intense tunnels, lateral-filled turns, and so many airtime hills. Voyage is truly Gravity Group's magnum opus, and Holiday World keeps this thing in tip-top shape, allowing it to be super re-rideable and with that wooden coaster feel to it. I'd really like to get back here and get more trimless rides on it without having to wait in a 2-hour line of enthusiasts, so I can see how I truly feel about the Voyage. Number 6, Skyrush at Hershey Park. Now I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I actually think this ride is more intense than I-305. It might be because of the trains and the more airtime focused ride, but even then, the positives feel more pronounced on this ride in my opinion. Overall, Skyrush is another ride that I truly question how Intamin thought, yeah, this is fine, especially opening it to the general public of Hershey Park. Skyrush takes positives, laterals, and of course airtime into the extremes and is truly a test of your limits. Number 5, El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is essentially a wooden Skyrush. Now, the forces aren't as strong, but there's something about this that is just so much better. Maybe it's because I have more attachment to this ride after working and riding it for so many years, but overall, this ride is the best wooden coaster in the world. The airtime and sequencing of elements is just perfect, and it just has a perfect blend of speed and extreme forces, along with that middle section, which I really do like. It gives a nice contrast to the rest of the layout, which is really just balls to the wall the entire time. Number 4, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Airtime, airtime, airtime. This ride definitely has it. The first half is super strong with its massive elements and sustained airtime. Even the inversions featured in the first half are amazing and really stand out, especially that snappy stall. The rest of the layout is a buffet of airtime pops and small hills. A lot of people put this ride down for the exact reason, because it does the same thing over and over again, and I can totally understand that, but to me it's still so enjoyable, and the inversions of course are thrown in for good measure. Overall, this is truly one of RMC's best, however it's not my favorite from them. Number 3. Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This is definitely the most powerful RMC and features the best variety of elements. It's got hang time, laterals, sustained ejector airtime, and quick pops. Even though it's a lot smaller than the rest of the rides in my top 5, it delivers so much in such a tiny space, and I would love to see more smaller RMCs just like this. Number 2. Lightning Rod at Dollywood. And after 3 years, Lightning Rod has finally been removed from my number 1 spot. I'm still basing this off from my 2019 ride since I haven't been back to Dollywood since then, so I have not experienced the steel track yet. I love how this ride starts off with an intense launch, which is not expected. The rest of the ride is filled with amazing airtime moments and one of the best settings of any coaster. I love flying around the mountainside and the trees, and especially at night. Of course, the ride ends with a famous quad down and flies into the final brake run since it's just built up a ton of speed. And coming in at number 1 is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. This thing rides like no other RMC. It takes every element super fast, features awesome laterals, some amazing sustained ejector airtime, and a rarity on RMCs, positive G-forces. Every time I got on Gwazi, I just did not want to get off, and 90% of the time, I got right back in line. Gwazi has an amazing drop, the best inversion, which is the death roll, and my favorite element of any coaster, which is that wave turn over the station. The rest of the ride is fast ejector airtime hills, turns, and inversions, and of course, it has a brake run that works really hard. They could have honestly put another 1,000 feet of track on this ride, but it's fine since it already has so much to it, and hitting the brake run that fast is honestly one of my favorite parts of the ride. Thanks everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Make sure to comment your opinions on my list and of course, some of your favorite coasters. Once again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.